Obviously, there are other things that are happening that I think Americans are angry about. The perception is, even though jobless rate, relatively speaking, a 6% jobless rate is not terrible. We are not anywhere near a depression in terms of joblessness. In fact, a lot of economists agree that anything around 5% or below is just structural unemployment. You know, you have the buggy whip makers who have to transition out and get into a new industry. So about 5% unemployment has been sort of the norm that economists have taught generations of students. We're at 6%, 6.1%, still not a crisis situation. But you know what angers Americans? It's the thought that those jobs have gone overseas. That's the point. They don't want 6%. Yeah, they'd rather have 3.5%, 4% unemployment, to be sure. But the idea that, and Frank Luntz pointed this out, I thought, very well yesterday. He said, people are mad at corporate America. Even businessmen, small businessmen, because small businessmen create most of the jobs in our economy. They're angry at the big CEOs and the big corporations. They believe that they've made the decisions. The big companies, the guys who've really gotten the big bucks and the big bonuses, they have made the decisions to send American jobs overseas. And that really, I think, it says a lot about our anger right now. It's very, very focused. You know, the suspicion, whether we're technically in a recession or not, the suspicion is we are in a recession. And psychologically, that has had an impact. The University of Michigan does this survey every month about consumer confidence that's released nationally. And that U of M survey shows that our confidence as consumers and as Americans participating in a market economy is lower, consistently lower than it has been for some time. Now, a second broad area besides being angry at the economy, a second broad area that has caused concern, of course, has been war. Now, I'm not here, in fact, I always tell my students this. I have only been a successful teacher if at the end of the semester you can't figure out whether I'm a Republican or a Democrat or an independent, and you don't know whether I'm conservative or liberal. Because the classroom is no place to push ideology down the throats of our students and make them just, you know, recitate. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much. I feel very strongly.
And the news media.
Well, I feel very strongly that it's my job to educate by respecting people's minds, saying, here are the data, here are the studies, here are the facts, here's what we observed. You make up your own mind, but I'm going to respect your intelligence. I feel very strongly about this. Well, the other area, so I am not making a statement that's either conservative or Republican or liberal or Democrat, but the concerns about the wars that we're currently engaged in are quite high. And I say that as a father who has sent a son to Iraq. So, you know, there's somebody in my family at our kitchen table, our dinner time conversations, we have a patriot right there at the dinner table who has served, and I'm very proud of him. So the concerns are widespread, both with the military families and the non-military families, the patriots, and then people who are the sort of let's criticize America first folks. I mean, everybody seems to be right now a little bit concerned about the wars. Couple of reasons. Afghanistan seemed to have been contained all the way back in 2001 by December, and then it wasn't. Iraq seemed to be contained as a problem by May 1st, 2003, and then it wasn't. But what's behind that? I have a little thesis about this. As an historian, I look at the length of time presidents have been at war. That's the first point I want to make about this. Take a look at our biggest wars. How long were our presidents actually having to serve as commanders-in-chief, as the Constitution requires them to be, during time of war? Let's take the Civil War. How long did Lincoln actually serve as commander-in-chief? 4 years. Okay? He was in charge of wartime operations for 4 years. And even if you look at his assassination, April 14th, the war, for all practical purposes, ended the same day. How many years did Franklin Roosevelt actually preside over combat operations?
4.
If you go from Pearl Harbor to his death in April of 1945, it would be 4 years. 4 years and I think just a couple of months, 4 months, 5 months. How about Vietnam? Johnson was our longest serving president during the Vietnam War. How long did he serve as a wartime commander-in-chief over military operations?
3 years.
4.
5 years, 2 months. 5 years, 2 months. If you date it from the Kennedy assassination on November 22nd, 1963, to when he was essentially felt that he was chased from office, leaves January 20th, 1969. It's a period of 5 years, 2 months, basically. Those were long wars by American standards, right? Civil War, World War II, Vietnam. How long has George W. Bush been a wartime commander-in-chief on a wartime footing? 7 years. I think there's your answer. Democracies like ours, where you have fast public opinion and 24-hour news cycles, don't do well in time of war if a war is perceived to go on and on and on. Lincoln, recall, didn't think he would win re-election in 1864. McClellan gave him the run for his money when McClellan had been one of his generals. And McClellan then said, no, I'm going to run as a Democrat, and I'm going to challenge you, Republican Abraham Lincoln. McClellan, Lincoln thought, until just a couple of months before that election, was going to win the election. Now, if Lincoln faced that, then certainly we can understand, and Johnson was essentially chased from office because of Vietnam, we can understand why Americans are impatient with presidents who fight long wars. So whatever your thought about the war is, the fact is, we have a tough time with war as a people. There's some historical evidence that when republics or democracies fight long wars, it tears them apart. I go all the way back to the ancient world to point to examples. 2 examples stand out. You know, people say that the Roman Republic could not stand all of the wars that it fought back in the 1st century BC. And it really was the unraveling of the Roman Constitution, and that's what prepared the way. A century of civil war prepared the way for Julius Caesar to become the tyrant that he was, the autocrat, who would overthrow the Roman Constitution. So the Rome, which had the republic that our founders admired the most, if you look at our founders and read their writings from the 1770s and 1780s, 1790s, what did they hold up as a model? They held up the Roman Republic. This is why you see, you go into Washington, D.C., and you go to the Capitol Rotunda, George Washington dressed in a toga. The founders viewed our founding as a rebirth of the Roman Republic in a significant sense. And what tore Rome down was war. And then what tore down Greece? The flower of Greek democracy was ancient Athens. And the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta tore Greek democracy apart. It really ended Sparta as the republic that it was, and Athens as the democracy that it was. Our founders knew these lessons. Our founders read their ancient history, and they knew that republics and democracies do not do well with long wars. Now, we're nowhere near a 30-year-long Peloponnesian War or a 100-year-long civil war, as in the case of Greece and Rome, respectively. But it is a cautionary tale that we need to keep in mind. It may explain why we are somewhat unhappy. Whatever your personal feelings about George W. Bush are, and I'm not here to preach on that one way or the other, but it does explain why we are restive. We grow impatient when our commanders-in-chief have been at war for longer than we're comfortable with. Besides the domestic issues that we mentioned and the wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, overall war on terror, there are a number of miscellaneous issues. I'll only focus, I'll mention immigration, for example, as one which has been very contentious in our society. On the one hand, you have people saying, why can't we defend our borders? And on the other hand, saying, but wait a second, we've always been an open society. The strength of America comes from opening our borders. So we have this contentious debate that is nowhere near being solved.